If you had to ask me what my favorite video game franchise of all time is, I would probably say the Metroid series. I personally don't consider Chrono to really be a series since it's only 2 games, so yeah, Metroid it is. I grew up a huge sci-fi nerd, so it makes sense. I personally believe Samus Aran is one of the most well-written and well-developed characters Nintendo has. I've always dreamed of them one day doing an origin story, in fact. Despite my love for it, however, I don't tend to replay the games all that often, and it's probably because I feel like a Metroid experience always sticks with you. You never really forget it. You don't necessarily have to play them all that much because they're always in your head. But it has been a while. I wanted to revisit parts of this amazing series and see how well they hold up. And I started with Metroid Prime, the series' first foray into 3 dimensions. Metroid Prime is a beloved game. It is often called the Citizen Kane of gaming. That's not an exaggeration, people really do say that. But I was curious to see if I would still think it held up just as well. Does this game that once revolutionized a genre still feel fresh? Does it still feel just as intuitive? Are the controls still just as tight? Is that Metroid feeling still there? Is Prime still a masterpiece? I strapped on the helmet, jumped into my gunship, and decided to find out. Whew. Wow, does this intro still hit just as hard. Retro Studios sure knows how to create a solid build-up, don't they? The amazing thing about Metroid Prime to me is how at times it can be so subdued and yet so bombastic and epic. It's a game that knows it's good, and it knows it doesn't have to tell you that. The moments that stick with you are great in number, but never so much that it becomes overwhelming. So, I'll get this out of the way right now. Metroid Prime is still a freaking masterpiece. And to be quite honest, I wasn't sure if this would be the case. It genuinely shocks me how well this game still holds up. And rather than go into every single detail of why it was so good at the time, I'd rather just tell you why I personally think even today the game feels so solidly made. It feels so solidly made that it could practically be modern. I just kind of want to go over some of the things I personally felt while playing it all these years later. Right from the get-go, I was stunned to see just how well Prime holds up visually. I'm firmly of the belief that art style can transcend any technical limitation, and the world of Prime is one that is so detailed, so varied in its biomes, and so wonderfully eerie that it's still a sight to behold. I played the game on an HD TV, and you can imagine my shock when I found that at no point did it ever stick out in a poor visual way. The level of detail is still staggering. You can tell Retro put their heart and soul into this game, and it amazes me just how well they translated the feel of the 2D games into 3 dimensions. From the moment Samus jumped off her ship and prepared for the mission that was to come, I was already floored. A rush of nostalgia hit me hard. Prime's opening segment is still effective. It brilliantly showcases many of the mechanics you'll be using in the adventure to come, while also perfectly setting the tone for what you can expect. You are alone, and you are never not going to be alone. That's the way of Metroid games. It's a unique concept, but it works beautifully. It gives the player this wonderful sense of desperation. It's almost like a horror game at times. One of the things that blew me away about Prime was its level design. This is the sort of thing that I feel can so easily age as video games develop. And I will admit, it's not absolutely perfect. There are times where I feel like I'm moving forward in a straight line a bit too much, and the backtracking can sometimes be a little tedious, but I can't stress enough how negligible these complaints are when compared to what it accomplishes. Talon 4 is to this day an incredible work of intricate rooms, puzzles, pathways, dead ends, and discoveries. You see, friends, in my opinion, Metroid Prime, and the series as a whole, is one of those games that perfectly utilizes a tried and true formula. I think about playing the Pokemon games, and how despite the fact that each entry is so similar, you always get to that point where collecting new Pokemon and forming your team almost becomes like a fever. You know what I mean? You're playing and all of a sudden it hits you. You're reminded why these games are so effective. Nintendo has banked on this sense of satisfaction for years and years, and it's because, quite frankly, there's some sort of science to a formula like this and how it appeals to us as humans. The Metroid series does the same thing, and in my opinion, it's entirely through its use of exploration and backtracking. If you've played the games, you know what I'm talking about. It's that feeling of 1 minute feeling so lost, only to then feel so accomplished as you figure out the next way to go. It's that feeling of coming across a sweet new upgrade for your suit, and then remembering that you had seen an area a few hours ago that required that upgrade to proceed. You then rush back in excitement, wondering what you'll possibly find as you make rapid progress. Will it be an upgrade? An artifact? Will it lead you deeper into Talon 4? Who knows? But you're itching to find out. One of the major reasons I feel Prime hasn't aged a day, and it's still a masterpiece, is because it so brilliantly pulls this off. It's one of the best uses of this formula in the entire series. What you end up getting is something that's like video game magic. Metroid Prime is so brilliantly designed because it's designed around the idea of player feedback. It has a way of making you, the player, feel intelligent for figuring it out, for realizing things like going back to a previous area with a power-up. And it does so in such a beautifully subtle way. The game is constantly guiding you, even if you don't always see that it is. In the end, it makes you feel like a genius at times. To my mind, the mark of good video game design is one that makes the player feel satisfied, one that makes the player feel accomplished. It's like, yeah, you know you're the one who made it through. It's one of the core reasons we play video games. In terms of what makes games unique among other mediums, I personally feel a game like Metroid Prime is about as, well, video gamey as it gets. It's all based on player interaction. If you're sheerly talking about what makes a video game, then wow, is it one of the absolute best examples ever of this sort of thing. Obviously, many games have come to adopt the original Metroid style, so what I'm describing here is nothing new, but Prime is still one of the smartest in its genre. One example is how backtracking hardly ever feels tedious, because the game is smart in placing elevators to each area in beneficial places at times. In this sense, you're never too far away from a shortcut to where you need to go. I never found personally that being stuck on where to go ever dragged either, because of the game's number of upgrades. Prime is an incredibly dense game. There are so many more upgrades than I remembered there being. This means that even when you're not making progress, you're still making some progress. Because in your quest to find the proper path, you're always finding upgrades along the way. And then when you finally do find your way, you feel like even more of a badass now for powering yourself up for the next challenge to come. There's never too much dead air in this sense. You're always doing something. It's a feeling that never gets old. That sense of intense satisfaction when you use your newfound skill to burrow deeper into the world of Talon 4. Hey, that energy tank I saw encased in ice so long ago? I can get it now with my plasma beam. Whoa, I got a spider ball power up. I remember tons of spider tracks out there that I can now use. I do wish the game had a slightly deeper variety in what you can find for upgrades, but hey, we all love to become stronger and stronger, right? I love how no area in the game is so large that you feel overwhelmed. And the map system, wow, how they achieved something so sophisticated on their first go is mind-boggling. As far as the rest of the game goes, I was pleasantly surprised at how well the platforming holds up, especially given how vertical some of the areas can be. This is not a flat world, and I feel that's one of the greatest reasons why Talon 4 holds up so well. It's dynamic. Combat could have certainly been a little more exciting, I'll admit, but I also don't think the game ever throws too much at you at any point to where it gets boring. All in all, Metroid Prime is a game with so very few flaws. It is truly a work of art. So far, I've talked about why I think Prime is still a masterpiece. The level design, the visuals, the effective opening. But I've yet to dive into the major reason why the Metroid series is my favorite of all time. The core singular reason that I think it's truly something special among other video game franchises. But instead of telling you what that reason is, I'd like to let the following clips do the talking for me. It makes your spine tingle, doesn't it? The Metroid series is absolutely second to none when it comes to atmosphere. We all value playing games for different reasons, but one of my personal favorites is immersion. I play games to get lost in other worlds and feel as though I've been transported somewhere else entirely. And the level of ambience in Metroid Prime is basically palpable. The one reason above all that I think this game still feels just as fresh today as it was back then is simply because Talon 4 is just so alive. Sure, the effects on Samus's visor, like the fog, reflections, and electricity, are incredible, but the sheer look, sound, and detail of the world. Metroid Prime gets under your skin. It makes you forget you're sitting in a room on a couch with a controller in your hand. It takes you into a whole different world. In my opinion, atmosphere is one of the most unique aspects of a video game because the feelings we get from it cannot be so simply described. It's something deep within us. Something that makes us feel in a way that no superlative does justice. It's kind of like love. That's right. Metroid Prime is the video game equivalent of love. The surface of Talon 4 is a lush and beautiful hub, But the rain reminds you that you're not quite out of this figurative storm quite yet. The caverns of Magmor swelter and fume as a steamy filter obscures your vision, and bubbling lava surrounds you at every turn. The music has a sense of urgency, as if to say to the player, "Watch out, this place burns and you gotta get out of here fast." And that's probably why Magmor Caverns is the most linear level in the game. It moves you along in a straight line constantly, its intense music urging you to escape the fiery fate that may befall you. Phendrana Drifts, on the other hand, is beautiful in its somberness. The slow falling snow, objects encased in ice, and gentle theme song make you feel as though you've stepped into a land long forgotten. The frigate Orpheon's theme has a friendly sense to it, perhaps because the force that once operated it is no longer a threat. It's drowned away. The theme moves along at a slow pace as you quite fittingly slowly wade through the dark depths. And of course, the Chozo Ruins features a catchy and upbeat tune, signifying the true start of your journey has begun. The music is no longer quite so relaxing as it was in the overworld, but also not without a sense of urgency now either. Only insects remain in this area, as this once proud colony now feels entirely abandoned. There's a sense of emptiness to the area, reminding you that you are essentially walking through a ghost town. One of my favorite examples of the game's brilliant music comes in the Talon Overworld. It has a very triumphant tone to it, doesn't it? When you listen to it, you feel like you've just finished a victory lap. And that's essentially what's happening every time you return to your ship. You've been working hard, chipping away at the ruins of Talon 4, and now it's time to come up for air. It's one of my favorite feelings in the game. You return to your sanctuary. You can see the sky again. The music is cheery and triumphant. There are no enemies. You know that it will always be here, and that every time you return, you can remind yourself not to let the loneliness of the world get to you. But you can't rest easy for long. Sooner or later, it's time to get back in there. It's time to return to the lion's den and recede deeper and deeper into the dangerous world before you. I love this feeling in the game so much. It's almost like the overworld is heaven, and each time you leave it and go deeper and deeper away, you're descending into the underworld itself. You are alone. It's just you against everything before you. You could even say that Metroid Prime is a game of you versus nature itself. And it's that unique sense of absolute loneliness and desperation that makes it feel so incredibly immersive. One must look no further than the incredible elevator sequences. Notice how they zoom in on Samus's face, as if this loneliness is almost starting to get to her? You're diving deeper and deeper, and the only thing accompanying you is the sound of electronics operating the elevator. Many can't get into a game like Metroid Prime because of its lack of story. And yes, the game does not have much of a story in the traditional sense, but I've always seen it as an entirely different kind of video game experience. One just as enjoyable. It's not a story per se, it's exploring a world. It's a tour. It's a trip to a different planet, taking in all the sights and sounds of nature along the way. And the fact that there's almost no dialogue or cutscenes to get in the way of that only makes you feel more and more immersed. Regardless of whether you like that sort of thing, there is no doubt at all that Metroid Prime does it better than most video games. It sprinkles in its share of epic moments, sure, but it also so stylishly juxtaposes them against a huge sense of exploration and atmosphere. It's what truly makes the game so remarkable to me. And it's impressive how Retro realized that better than even Nintendo at times. The journey is an unforgettable one, but not necessarily because of the plot twists you encountered or the character arcs, but rather for the feeling you got in exploring a completely different universe, one that you could swear was real by the end. So, does Metroid Prime hold up? I'm honestly floored at how well it holds up. It may not be perfect, but I'd be willing to call it a flawed masterpiece. I was actually giddy in writing this script because any fear that I had that this game has aged has evaporated completely. Metroid Prime is undoubtedly still an absolutely amazing experience. I hope that I did the game some justice, and I hope that you enjoyed.